But quack, quack, what comes with quack, quack? Duck soup. Duck soup. That's an idiomatic expression. There is a profound question which rings in our ears, and I don't mean just the congregation here, but it's pretty widely puzzled over or reflected on in society in general. A profound question from the dawn of human history. Mostly, like all things which are biblical, it's misunderstood by a broad spectrum of humanity. But the questioner here is questioning God. And, of course, God already knows the answer, just like He does to all of the things that are going on around us. But the questioner arrogantly demands of God, am I my brother's keeper? Of course, that's Cain after he has murdered Abel, and he's being confronted by God, and God says, where is your brother? And he says, am I my brother's keeper? So God at that point does not answer the question. Instead, He goes ahead and deals with Cain for what he has done. But there is an answer to the question, and it's an answer to the question given by God at a later time. And so I'd like to, in this sermonette, look at God's eventual answer to Cain's question. Am I my brother's keeper? I can look at all of you sitting here and ask that question, and it's a question between you and I. Am I my brother's keeper? And I don't, of course, exclude sister. We're siblings together, so it's inclusive. First of all, in order to answer the question, what I would say is we need to define a term. Defining a term. Who is my brother? It was pretty obvious that Cain and Abel were brothers. In fact, they were, as far as we know, the first two human beings who had been born at that time. And so they were obviously well known to each other, and they regarded each other as brothers. I think about my own personal life, and I discovered after I'm probably 50 years old, I don't remember exactly how old, when I found that I had a brother I didn't even know about. More than having a brother that I didn't know about, he had exactly, well, almost exactly, the same name as I have. And he didn't still exist. His name was Johnnie, but it's spelled with a Y. Mine was spelled with an I-E. That was a mistake on my birth certificate. Johnnie N. Lambert, Jr. And he died in Korea at the age of 18 when I was 8 years old, 1950. And so I had not had any opportunity to meet him. Subsequently, I did go to find his gravesite. Hazel and I went and found his gravesite. They brought him back from Korea and buried him in cemetery in Shreveport, Louisiana. And we found his burial site there. So I am, those of you who know that I sign my name to emails from time to time as Junior, because Lori, our daughter Lori, named me as Junior back in the days of Smokey and the Bandit. You know, the character in there named Junior. Well, she named me Junior, and so I am a junior, but I'm known as Junior. on that when I signed those emails. Well, I'm junior number 2. He was junior number 1. So he is my brother. Cain asked, am I my brother's keeper? Now, a brother is someone, we're defining the term here, a brother is someone who shares, in some way or another, a mother and or a father. That's what makes you brothers. You are from the same family, and you have the same mother and or father. There's also a secondary, it's really the primary usage of the word, and that is to make a spiritual distinction between people. On one hand, you have a spiritual definition of a brother, and you have a physical definition of a brother. Myself and my same name brother, we were physical brothers. That's an example of the fact that there really is a spiritual brother, a spiritual family. And we have to make a distinction between brother, and this is where much of the world goes wrong. They don't catch the distinction between a brother and a neighbor. You know, and we can look at what it has to say in Luke chapter 10. We won't go there, but just calling it to your memory, in Luke chapter 10, the lawyer who is asking Christ, questioning Christ, asked the question, who is my neighbor? And Christ gives him an answer as to who our neighbor is. In fact, the answer boils down to this. Every human being on the face of the earth is your neighbor. And we have responsibilities to our neighbors, don't we? In fact, Christ delineates very specifically some of the responsibilities there in Luke chapter 10 that we all have to our neighbor. If our neighbor is in an emergency situation and he needs help, it's our responsibility to give him that help. But there's a big distinction between your neighbor and your brother. In my physical family, I would have a much higher responsibility. It's a much more restrictive category. It's not every human being on the face of the earth. It's every human being that shares, in this case, the same father. Myself and my namesake shared the same father. So we were brothers. But the rest of humanity would be my neighbor. And I have a big responsibility to all of humanity, but even a bigger responsibility to my brother. Now here's an answer from Christ about who really is our brother. Cain asked the question, am I my brother's keeper? Here Christ re-identifies the family. Matthew chapter 12, verses 49 and 50. He stretched forth his hand toward all of the disciples and said, and they had come asking him, saying that your mother and brother are outside and they want to see you. He reaches out his hand and says, behold, my mother and my brothers. And he's not talking about his physical family there. He's talking about those people who are his disciples and are following him. whosoever shall do the will of my Father which is in heaven, the same is my brother, sister, and mother. To our brother, our sister, and our mother, we have a much higher responsibility than is defined in Luke chapter 10. You and I have a much greater responsibility toward each other because we are siblings in the same family. Who is that family? Well, those people who share the same father and the same mother. Who was our father? When we are baptized, we have hands laid on us, and we are begotten as a spiritual child of God the Father. For those of us who have done that, then we are sharing the same Father. The mother is God's church. Father and mother. And if we have the same father, even if we don't have the same mother, or if we have both, the same father and same mother, then we are siblings in God's family, begotten spiritual children of God. I'd like you to notice too, there is an exclusion I call it an exclusion by contrast. Those who do not, or we say, if this is how Christ identified those who are his mother and his brother as being those who do the will of God, what does that say about those who are not doing the will of God? They are not our brothers, are they? I would flow from that. They are still our neighbors. We still have a lot of responsibility toward them, but our big responsibility, even much bigger responsibility, is toward our brother. So in answering the question, I think it's important to properly identify the family. It's also important to properly make the distinction about who our brother is. Because if we try to have the same responsibility toward everyone that we have toward our brother, it's going to be very hard. It's going to be very hard. We will have that responsibility someday. But it's a question that Cain asked in one setting 4,000 years before God, because Christ is God, answered the question for this lawyer or for the people in the group there that asked, who said your mother and your brothers are waiting outside, they want to see you. He answered the question that was really asked 4,000 years before. Who is my brother? And he said, the real answer, the spiritual answer, the big answer is those who obey the will of my Father in heaven. So Christ answers that same question, ties the Old Testament to the New Testament in that way. What kind of an answer is it? Then that after we make those distinctions, what kind of an answer do we have? Quack, quack. Duck soup. It's an easy answer. If you don't know what duck soup means, it means it's the easiest thing to know. It's a duck soup answer. I'll give you one verse of Scripture which makes it very conclusive. Matthew 25, verse 40. There is the parable of the sheep and the goats. But I'm just going to read one verse because that's all you need for this duck soup answer. The king shall answer and say to them, truly I say unto you, inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of these my brethren, you have done it unto me. Do we have a responsibility? Who is my brother? That's who our brother is. What's our responsibility to our brother? The same as it would be to Christ himself. The answer? Yes, we are our brother's keeper. Duck soup. Just demands that we properly, rightly define the word brother, and then we understand we are our brother's keeper. It's really duck soup.